Your Excellency, Dr. Anwar Gargash, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I especially want to thank the support of Her Excellency Reem Al Hashmi, UAE Minister of State for International Cooperation and Director General and Managing Director for the Expo 2020, for her exemplary leadership, inspiring and making sure that the event was a success. Ladies and gentlemen, gender bias contributes to one of the most pervasive and universal of inequalities. It fuels attitudes and behaviors that are among the most resistant to change. Gender discrimination, blatant sexism, and stereotyping give women and girls less value and power than men and boys. They influence and shape young women's ambitions, limiting their sense of what is both possible and appropriate for them. They keep women and girls from pursuing impactful STEM careers and high-level leadership roles, burden them with a disproportionate share of unpaid care work, and fuel violence against women and children. And that is why it has always been uplifting for me to see women leaders such as Her Excellency Reem Al Hashmi take a front and center role in the UAE, particularly at Expo 2020. On this International Women's Day, we celebrate her and all women in leadership here in the UAE and around the world. We know that crises only magnify existing inequalities. As our societies continue to endure the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, rising conflict, and the growing climate emergency, our work to counter gender bias is even more important. An immediate step that we can take to ensure more young women in leadership positions is to address the violence and discrimination faced by women who speak out in the public sphere. This has become even more crucial in the past few years as online harassment and violence is being used to silence these women. There is urgent need to implement measures to counter sexism and hate speech. We must take an all-of-society approach, working with men and boys and non-traditional allies and forging strong multilateral partnerships. Women's leadership is crucial, not only in government, but also in the private sector. For business to succeed, we need to see women fully represented throughout the private sector, as CEOs, as entrepreneurs, on boards, and across the levels of business. This work lies at the heart of the sustainable, equitable, and peaceful world envisioned in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. On this International Women's Day, at Expo 2020 in Dubai and everywhere, let us challenge gender bias when we see it, refuse to be bystanders to discrimination, and work together for a more equal and peaceful world for all people. Thank you.
Thank you once again to Her Excellency Amina Mohammed for lending her voice to today's forum, of course, reiterating the importance of women in leadership positions. Now, it is certainly a great privilege and great honor for me to be moderating the very first session of the day. I'm looking forward to learning so much more about this very point, this very topic. It's a very challenging topic, redefining the future for women. Fortunately, I have here with me on stage some of the finest people in the field, 4 global policymakers who all share the commitment to creating a more equal future. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our first panelists of the day, the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. Thank you. Dr. Natalia Khanum, Executive Director, UNFPA. His Excellency, Dr. Anwar Gargash, former Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, UAE. And of course, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the WTO. Now, His Excellency Dr. Anwar and Dr. Ngozi will be joining us remotely. Please, have a seat. Thank you all so much for being with us today on this really important and momentous occasion for International Women's Day. Thank you, of course, Dr. Anwar and Dr. Ngozi for joining us remotely as well. I'd like to start off by mentioning just, I think, a very interesting statistic from a recent UNDP survey, which covered around 80% of the world's population across 75 countries. It found that 90% of men and women hold some sort of bias against women. I was surprised to find that that was such a universal condition, and certainly that was across both genders. But luckily we have people today who are making the difference in policy. So Your Excellency, if I may, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah.
In Bangladesh, women have held the office of head of state for longer than men, 27 out of the 50 years, which is an incredible achievement. Yep, thank you, good. So what has such strong leadership, how has that impacted the role of women in society? How has that trickled down? And how can more women become involved in the political process?
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to join this panel at the Women's Pavilion at Dubai Expo 2020. Well, the question you asked me, I can tell you one thing, that in our country, actually our society was really very much conservative. But after liberation, our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, when he took over power, he gave us a constitution. In this constitution, he mentioned that the men and women will get equal right. And not only that, to develop the women leadership, in our parliament, there are reserved seat for women. And give more importance to education. So education, economic freedom, those are very important. But in our country, as you know, that through a long struggle, we achieved our democracy. Only 3.5 years, my father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, father of nation Bangladesh, he got only 3.5 years to run the country. After that, we had time and again military dictatorship. And during that time, actually, our women didn't get any chance. Now, after 21 years, when I formed government, I found that women had no place in anywhere, totally neglected. So I took some initiative. Like, first thing, not only education, because education up to graduate level, it was free. But what I did, I tried to create job opportunity for them. So that way I started helping people. As you know that my father whole life he struggled. So when I return home, definitely I receive people's support. Besides that, since my school life, I was very much involved in politics. Even during college, I was elected vice president of the college union. During university, I was very much involved. So I knew the country, knew the problem, and I learned from my father. My father is the mentor of me. So not only that, I also learned to love my people and country, and also how to work for poor people. So the military ruler ruled this country almost directly, overtly or covertly, about 21 years. So as you know that in this world, wherever military rulers rule, they are very conservative and they give more space for especially for the women. But I open up everything for women. In higher education, then higher post like judiciary, and also in the government job, I'm now up to the higher level, then in the military, army, air force, our border guard, everywhere. Because my father started giving job opportunity women to the police and other states, so I follow the suit. So that way, I can tell you that I achieve support from people. So that is my main strength, that people's support, people's faith, and people realize that if I am there, definitely they will be beneficiary. But it was not that easy, you know. In the country, my entire family was assassinated. My father, mother, my three brothers, two sister-in-laws. But my younger sister and myself were abroad. When I returned home, all the killers or the war criminals, everybody, they were in power. So my journey was not very smooth. Time and again, I face, sometimes they try to kill me through grenade, and then anti-propaganda, all these things. But I didn't care for that. I thought that I have to work for people. And as a woman, definitely the problem is there. But our male, our colleagues, I must appreciate them that they cooperate with me. So that is my strength. And in Bangladesh, yes, it's not only me, even the opposition, also women. And at this present, this is very interesting, that in the parliament, speaker, leader of the house, leader of the opposition, and deputy leader, all are women. So how do we explain that? Our male are very weak? No, not that. But they are very much cooperative. I must appreciate that. And you see, you should realize one thing. Women is not only women. Women are mothers. So with a motherly affection, if you run a country, definitely people will support you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Again, absolutely inspiring to see how many women are in leadership positions in Bangladesh, something I hope that we'll see more across the world. And sort of picking up from that point, Your Excellency, Dr. Anwar, I wanted to speak to you about the reforms that the UAE has put in place when it comes to offering more economic empowerment to women, offering better benefits from a social perspective. Can you tell me a little bit about those initiatives, the impact, and perhaps other ways that they can be scaled up to be applied in other nations and other locations?
Thank you, Amar. Thank you very much. And I would like to take this opportunity actually to give an Emirati context to our discussion today. Things don't happen because of good intentions. Things happen because you need leadership, you need an activist agenda. You can't just say that women empowerment is going to work because it's the right thing to do. You can't be passive. And I think in the UAE, I would consider the enablement of women in a country that has so many great achievements. I would consider and rank that this is perhaps our one single greatest achievement from my perspective. I think here you have taken a very conservative Islamic society with all the stereotypes that are surrounding such a society, and you've turned it around. And I think this has been done mainly because of leadership. Sheikh Zayed, the founder of the UAE, and I have to also, give tribute really to Sheikh Fatma bint Mubarak. They have been instrumental in this program of shifting what is essentially a conservative society and embarking on this journey of women enablement. I saw among the crowd Sheikh Lubna Al-Qasimi, who is our first minister, female minister. And it is steps like these that make a difference. You need role models, you need an activist agenda. And I think in the UAE, we have done that throughout the years. And now we're moving to what I would call a third gear, a fourth gear of legislating, because we've done all that through education, through participation of women in different walks of life. And I think one of the important things that I want to also emphasize, it is essential to get women in what I would call strategic national projects. And Expo, and we've seen my colleague Reem Al Hashmi speak today, and she's done a wonderful job with Expo. It is actually getting women involved in these strategic projects, such as our Mars mission, Expo, etc., and bring women and be totally involved in this. In the foreign ministry, and I've been involved in UAE diplomacy for 14 years. Uh, I we have today a diplomatic corps that's 40% women. When we started with Sheikh Abdullah in the foreign ministry, women would take the job, but they will be hesitant to go abroad. And this has changed. But how do these things change? Again, I urge that we do have an activist agenda. The UAE has not really become the first on the gender equality index in the region by being passive, by relying on what I would call good intentions, by allowing things to balance themselves naturally. The UAE has been successful in breaking a lot of glass ceilings through this sort of activist agenda from day one. And now I think we are in the process where we want to see more legislation in order to break new frontiers. Today, for example, women comprise 60% of our federal government. But although they are represented in the private sector and they are not as represented in the same way. So we need to legislate that. At the same time, for example, I was involved in the UAE's elections to our Federal National Council, which is our parliament. And of course, prior to these elections, this was completely male appointed Federal National Council. That was broken through allowing women to run, through allowing women to vote. And here again, we did not arrive at the sort of representation that is, in my opinion, fair and balanced. And we resorted to a quota system here. So 50% today of our parliament is women. So you do need to use all your tools through an activist agenda. It's a matter of leadership. And I think we are now in a place where we need to use our laws in order to legislate areas that need to be legislated in order for women to be better represented on board. So, for example, women today in the UAE are represented on corporate boards at 10%. That, I think, for what we would like to see for the UAE is not good enough. And I think throughout all these years, I was very proud to see the first Emirati ambassador take her post. I was very proud to see Emirati ministers, female ministers, do very well. And I was very proud to see a lot of changes. And the beauty of all this is that these changes have also been taken very well by society. The UAE story of enabling women has not been a conflictual story. The UAE story of enabling women has been actually a story of accepting these changes and realizing that they are better for society, and that this is the way to go. And I would credit this, as I said, mainly to leadership, and mainly the leadership applying a very dynamic, non-passive agenda.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So I want to pick up on that point of the non-passive, the activist agenda, that there really is a need for people in policy-making positions to take a very active, proactive role. And turn over to you, Dr. Khanam. Now, as we've seen from the current global health crisis, gender inequality still remains a major issue in terms of addressing health issues, including sexual reproductive health. I'd love to hear from you and your experience and what you've seen, what more can be done, what types of policies can be put in place to address this inequality.
Well, thanks so much, Omar. I'm delighted to be here. This expo is about dialogue. It's about communities having debate. And In wishing everyone a happy International Women's Day, I'll say that for me, if I could bottle all the passion and the enthusiasm and the activism of a UNFPA, I would want everyone to understand the wisdom in investing in an adolescent girl. And many of you have been champions of this idea. And why is that? Women are perfectly capable of leading. Women are equipped to run their business, to be whatever it is that they aspire to be. The barriers that people construct can also be disassembled. It's very important to understand that your worldview begins in your family. If you're lucky enough to have a family, because with the conflict situation that is plaguing the world today, there are many children on the move, and it's always going to be a woman, a girl, a pregnant woman who is going to be at the bottom of the equation. And this needs to change, this must change. And I say that following Antonio Guterres, who's pledged gender equality within the UN, and you heard our Deputy Secretary General, very proud to have served with her, and Ngozi Pumzile is here today. The point of gender parity is to show that we're stronger and we're better when we have everyone's ideas. And the suppression of ideas begins very young. So for that dad, for that brother, for that mother to be encouraged to privilege the adolescent girl in her worldview is really, really very, very crucial. When that happens, economic empowerment and so much else follows. But if she is squelched, if she's not allowed to live her life in larger freedom, as the United Nations Charter assures us, then what you have is a disempowered girl who it's very easy to set aside. How is she going to rise to be minister one day? So the objective of UNFPA's 3 zeros, which have to do with bodily autonomy, if you have control of your own self, knowing you can plan your family, that you can be married at the appropriate age, and also that violence will come to an end. It is always a sorrow for me to repeat the well-established statistic that 1 in 3 women and girls are going to be affected by gender-based violence, by harassment online. This is what UNFPA's Body Right campaign, and this is something that's gone viral with young people, because it asks all young people, boys and girls, women and men, to address the fact that the phone, the internet, should be a space of equality for everyone, especially for women and girls, and demands that the same attention that's paid to copyright be paid to body right, so that embarrassing things do not live in perpetuity online. And the last point I want to make, being here in Dubai, is the importance of partnership. All of the things that we've heard about success really mean that we've got to work together, hand in hand. And I think we have some really brilliant ideas about innovating to do that in this country. Very impressed to have been at the Museum of the Future, and thinking that the future really is in our hands, and that we've, again, have to help young people overcome the barrier that dismisses the contribution of women and girls. We have a lot to do with peace, and this is a moment in history when that's really needed, Omar. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Khanum. And now, Dr. Ngozi, thank you. Obviously, you've been here listening to all of your fellow panelists, their perspectives, everything they've said. We'd love to hear from you now specifically on the issue of trade, the economic potential that should be afforded to women to allow them to reach their full advancement, the participation in the global economy. I'd love to hear from your experience, what are the major obstacles stopping women from capitalizing on these economic opportunities? What trade-related policy reforms are needed to ensure women aren't left behind? Please share with us.
Well, thank you very much. First, let me start by saying Happy International Women's Day to everyone from here in Geneva. And it's wonderful to be on the panel with my sister, Natalia Kana, with Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina. Thank you for sharing with us, and to congratulate the UAE government and Her Excellency Rima Al Hashmi for the wonderful Expo and what they've done to put forward the Women's Pavilion. So congrats to you on doing this today. Let me perhaps say 2 or 3 things about, from the point of view of the economics of allowing women equal opportunity, and then talk a little bit about bring trade into that equation. I've heard the arguments that have been made on leadership, on control of our own destinies and our bodies, all the reasons why women should be given the opportunity to lead and to participate. But there are 2 or 3 things that are so astonishing to me on the economic side. So many studies have been done. And I'll just recall one for you, a McKinsey study in 2015 that showed that if women are given equal opportunity as men, we would add $28 trillion to the global economy by 2025. Can you just think about that number? The fact that the world is missing out by not giving women equal opportunity to participate in the economy as men. We're missing out an additional $28 trillion from global GDP. And I ask myself, so why would we want to do that? Because if we allowed women the opportunity, we would all be better off. Means that the world would be wealthier, richer, would have more to go around. So that's one thing we should keep in our minds, that it's not just a question really of the moral thing to do or, the good thing to do. It is the sensible and smart thing to do. Allowing women equal opportunity is smart economics if we want to improve our living standards and those of our children and generations to come. So that's the first point. Still on the issue of opportunity, education, I think that has been alluded to. Again, so many studies have been done to show that educating women adds not only to the wealth of the woman and her family, but that of the nation. Studies are, for example, there's a World Bank study showing that the return on 1 extra year of secondary education for a woman means a 25% increase in salary for the woman in later life. If you give a woman 1 extra year of education, it means that her children are better educated, they are healthier, and all this contributes to the well-being of the nation. So the fact that in this pandemic, UNESCO is saying that about 11 million children, girls, including girls, will be out of school, is something that should give us pause, because it means that we are going to be missing out, not just in terms of those girls themselves, but in terms of, future benefits for their families and for society. The third point I want to make is now in the pandemic, we've also seen that digital is the wave of the future. We've seen e-commerce thrive. And this is an amazing opportunity that has opened up for women. Many women-owned businesses survived during the pandemic because they were digital, they were on the internet. And we found in our work here at the WTO that most of the women-owned businesses that are on the internet tend to export. And they tend to earn twice as much as businesses, traditional businesses, for women who are not doing business digitally. So this is a huge opportunity. How do we exploit this digital trade in the future to make sure that women benefit as much as possible? They can export, they can make twice the income, because the data is showing us that this is one way we can increase opportunities for women through trade. So on the economic side, we've got more than enough evidence to show that giving women equal opportunity, it's not about being kind or nice or moral. It's really about allowing society to benefit economically in a way it wouldn't have when women and girls are left out. So the hard facts are there. So I really want to make that point, that in addition to all the things that have been said, economically, this is important. Now, of course, there are barriers in the way. On the trade side, we've been looking at these barriers. And it starts all the way from lack of access to finance, which many women-owned businesses encounter, including trade finance. Sometimes when you enter that export market, you don't have the resources to really make it work. Other barriers are, quality, lack of access to certain markets because you don't meet the quality standards. So helping women to break into and take care of those quality standards is something that can help double or triple their income. I'll just give an example. Our sister organization here, the International Trade Center, which is an offshoot of the WTO and the WTO and UNCTAD, has been helping women-owned businesses just to improve the quality of their product. And I saw in my own country, Nigeria, where they were working with women in the shea butter business who were not able to access markets in the US or in Europe because their product did not meet the quality standards. By working with them and training them and helping them to meet those standards, these women doubled their income. They were able to send their children to school, even to university, some of them told me. And they were able to open other income-generating businesses and employ more people and more women. So in trade, just by working on improving quality, on giving the women more information on how to access markets, both externally and internally, you're able to do so much more to improve the living standards of the women, to contribute to the nation, to improve the livelihoods of the family and of the children going forward. So these are the illustrations of a few areas where, and the fundamental principle that giving women equal opportunity is not about being kind or being charitable. It's about allowing economic opportunity to benefit all of us. And we need men. Dr. Gagash talked about leadership. We need men, to be able to recognize this. They are occupying most of the positions, and unless they step aside and allow women that opportunity, or they support and encourage them, this will not happen. I often tell women, when you're looking for mentors, it's not just about looking for women mentors, but also we need to bring the men in and to start at an early age to educate our boys about all these facts that are put on the table, so that as they grow up also, they will be able to give women the opportunities, give girls the opportunities they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ngozi. Okay. So now thank you so much, Dr. Ngozi. We've now had the opportunity to hear a little bit from each of you. What I'd like to do is come back and sort of look at what you believe is the single most important either policy reform or initiative that needs to be enacted in your specific space that policymakers here in the audience today, people watching us internationally, can take on board and really apply, hopefully moving on from today, to help us close that gap and really move closer to achieving true gender equality. Your Excellency, if I could start with you. In your long experience, the longest serving woman head of state, what do you believe is still the most important policy you have yet to enact that can help with having more female representation, more rights for women in your country?
Well, as I've already mentioned, look, in our country, we adopted the Women Development Policy just to give more space to the women for work. And not only that, also, yes, just to overcome all the biases and prejudice, I must say that we must give more education, equal education for healthcare, for reproductive program or any other program. The male and men and women both should be considered. Only you can just put pressure to women, but I think in a society, if you want to develop a society, then definitely women are the half of the society. So you should have given them all the opportunities so that they can, contribute, they can work, they can get more opportunity. That is very, very important, what I believe. And our country, we have taken all the initiative, and any policy, any work, anything, we always give opportunity to both. If we do not work together, how we can develop a country? For health service, like I have established community clinic for everywhere, so that our people can get health care, then food security, then others security, everything. But we never discriminate that only women or men. I consider the both. But definitely, as because women are left behind, we must give them more opportunity to work.
Thank you so much. I think that's obviously on point with many things we've heard from each of you, that this is a mutually beneficial calculus. Is something where it benefits all of us, men and women, our whole entire global society, when we have more equality. So thank you so much for your thoughts. Your Excellency, Dr. Anwar Gargash, do you have a single policy, a single piece of advice you'd like to share?
Well, I think we have to be on guard. Looking around us in the Arab world, we've seen a regression of women's rights in what were traditionally leading metropolises in the Arab world. So we should understand that this is not a linear progress. We have to safeguard this progress and continue. So I think with regards to policies, policies are one thing and they need to be implemented. And I think here we're talking about implementation. Implementation is extremely important to create the work, to support working women, for example, create the environment that supports working women. To, as I said, in the UAE's case, ensure that women are more in the private sector and playing a larger role in the private sector vis-a-vis what big achievements they have done in government. It's about implementation, and it's also realizing that not only because you make progress, that this progress is taken for granted. We've seen cases, as I mentioned, of regression in enabling women in the region around us. And these are places that have had a head start over the UAE in education and in what I would call social liberalization, etc. So we have to be on guard. It's about policy, it's about implementation, and it's about understanding that enabling women is also something that we need to protect and we need to support and keep on that drive. Passivity will not serve us well.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Dr. Khan, I'd like to hear from you as well quickly before we wrap up.
Yes, well, very succinctly, I think, part of UNFPA's success is that we listen to women, and we listen to women on the ground. And what they've told me kind of echoes and reverberates with what others have said. When something is a priority, put it in the budget. We want to see the line item for women's health so that a mother can survive. We want that parliamentarian to be aware that, yeah, we want to see a line item for the education of that adolescent girl who should be allowed to return to school, whatever her condition or situation. And yes, I think for families also have to prioritize the girl in the budget, in the nutrition, and in so much else. At the end of the day, it does come down to partnership, to pay. Domestic as well as international finance has to be mobilized so that gender equality becomes a reality and so that peace becomes a reality. We have to end gender-based violence. That's going to begin in the home, in the community, but that also has to be prioritized by governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khanna. Appreciate it. And Dr. Ngozi, just very quickly, we're basically out of time, but I need to include you in the conversation as well. Of course, you talked about the economic benefits. So how can countries enact those changes and get women more involved in the global economy and global trade?
Well, in global trade, what we're trying to do at the WTO is to try to get to rules that will help integrate women and women-owned businesses better into national, regional, and global value chains. And that's what we're really trying to do. How do we bring women who are often excluded more into trade? Writing rules, which is one of the things that the WTO does, is one of the things we are looking at. And I'm happy to say that a recently concluded agreement on regulation of domestic services by 67 of our members for the first time puts, there's an article that really spells out that women must be given the same opportunity as men in the services business. And this is the first time we're getting that into those agreements. So I think this is the way to go, that we reflect it in the rules that we make so that women will have equal opportunity. We have a group of 127 members here that are working really hard to try and advance the issue of women in trade at the organization, and I'm very proud of what they're doing. But let me just end by saying one thing. Policies are good and laws are good, but we've in many countries enacted a lot of policies and a lot of laws, but they are not implemented. So I think we also need to look at what do we do for attitudinal change, not just policy change, but until we educate people that women are not a threat and women in leadership is something that is good for society. Until we begin to make that attitudinal change, we might make policies, we might make laws, but they may not be implemented in the way we want. So I want us to talk about policy changes along with serious attitudinal change and work on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's hear it for our fantastic panelists. What a great first session for the day. Thank you all so much for coming down, taking your time, and joining us, of course, on International Women's Day. Just before we wrap the panel, we'd like to leave you with a short video from Her Excellency Ann Linde, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden. She unfortunately could not be with us today, but she has a unique perspective on how governments should use gender lenses to pursue foreign policy, lessons to share from the Swedish government's official feminist foreign policy, which was launched back in 2014. Let's all take a look. Thank you all so much.
Still today, around the world, the daily life of women and girls are marked with bias, discrimination, and systematic subordination. And this has only been made worse by the pandemic. Now that we are rebuilding, we have a chance to make it right by integrating gender analysis in our recovery packages, as well as in our public policies and budgeting. In pursuing a feminist foreign policy, Sweden puts gender equality and human rights at the top of our agenda and at the very core of our foreign policy. Because all experiences speaks to that the more equal a country is, the more prosperous it is. And we know that in societies where women participate economically and politically, there is more peace and less violence. We need to put women and girls at the center of our humanitarian efforts in conflict, be it those suffering from the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the women and girls I have met in the conflict in Yemen or elsewhere. On International Women's Day 2022, we pledge our support towards understanding different and new perspectives for gender roles and responsibilities. We commit to building on the momentum for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls to break stereotypes that hinder progress. Let us break the bias and make this world a better, fairer, safer place where women will be able to live a life of dignity and respect.
What inspiring words from Her Excellency Ann Linde. Of course, we thank her for lending her voice, sharing those thoughts with us today on International Women's Day. Now, speaking of inspiration and indeed empowering role models, it is now my honor to welcome a symbol of resilience worldwide. Her personal story, her fighting spirit has led her to become a global advocate for survivors of genocide and sexual violence, a human rights activist. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me now in welcoming Nobel Prize laureate and UN ODC Goodwill Ambassador, Nadia Murad, who is joining us online.